Welcome back. So, the last session we are done with distribution network. So, here we are in this session we are going to discuss, it may go into another session next week, but we are going to commence or start our discussion on network designing. And just before going to the break, we said what do you mean by a network? A network of facilities, a facility which does different types of functions for a particular company. Okay. Now, what are the factors that determines, what are the broadly, so what does a role a facility plays? So, designing or selection of a location broadly will depend upon the company has to decide what would be the function of that particular facility, what role it would play in the entire supply chain process. Is it just a warehouse? Is it a terminal? Is it an assembly section? Is it a distribution center? Or is an whatever, or is it a fulfillment center? Is it a packaging center? So, also what would be the capacity of that particular facility? One is the role or the function, and then what would be the capacity, the production capacity of that particular facility. Number 3, location. Where would it be located? Number 4, its distance from market and supplier. So, when you say a role, is this a regional distribution center or is it a national distribution center? I can give you an example. For instance, if this is the entire region, the company can think of having one center catering to the all the markets in that particular country. Suppose assume this this area reflects a country, or the company may think of having different regional centers and not one. So, either one center, a national distribution center, or maybe a regional distribution center. Now, the company in doing that, they have to consider the fact that if they have too many centers, and for instance, if there is a drop in demand, if there is a sort of a recession and the demand, and if this market, the demand drops in this market and this market and this market, then these facilities would be idle. There will be idle capacity. So, in that case the company may think, if it is a volatile market, if they may think of having one centralized center than having different regional centers, different regional facilities, different regional branches, whatever is centralized or decentralized. Broadly, that is what we are discussing about the role. Capacity. Now, if I have decided that I am going to have different centers at different regions or state or areas, I have to determine what would be the capacity that I would associate. When I say capacity, if it is a warehouse, what is the capacity that the warehouse may store? If it is a production unit, how much production, how much volume of material that this particular plant would be capable to produce. So, the capability or the capacity of that particular location, that is the second thing that a company has to decide when it designs its network. Any company if you see, and it is not necessarily that the network is restricted within the country, within the same country where the company originates from. Today companies are going global. So, they may have network beyond the country boundaries, they can have centers, facilities at overseas locations also. So, it is not necessarily it has to be within the country. Location, very important. Now, mind you, when you establish a facility, there is certain cost which is considered as sunk cost. A sunk cost is the cost which is the initial investment that was required to establish that particular facility, whatever it may be. It could be a production unit, it can be a warehouse as I was just mentioning, it can be an assembly plant, it can be a bottling plant, it can be a distribution center, whatever it may be. It can be the company's logistics center. But once it has been established, and tomorrow if you find that is not the ideal location for the particular facility, then it takes a huge effort, a huge investment. There is a lot of, in order to shift this location to some other place. That means you have invested a certain amount for no reason. That money has gone down the drains. So, the location has to be selected in a very, very careful manner. Third, why do I have facilities? As I said, the different facilities. So, why do I have facilities? Basically, on one side I have to receive shipments from a supplier and I have to deliver it to a customer. So, I have two areas and my location has to be very, very strategic, so that I am neither distance away from either the supplier or the market. The supplier who is providing me supplies, either finished goods or raw materials, or the market where I have my customers who are buying from me, my consumers. Should I be close to the customer? Should I be away from the customer? Should I be closer to the suppliers? And it depends upon lot of things. Basically, every company tries to create a balance. So, broadly, these are the four areas broadly that a company would analyze when they design their network. I hope this is clear. For a while, I just draw your attention to the board. The role of the facility, the capacity of that particular facility, the location where that facility or the plant, and its positioning in a manner that it is optimum distance away from the, or a very effective, the distance between the market and the supplier is the best for that particular company. Now, we will go to our presentation and see this in detail. Let us go to the presentation. We will skip this particular slide. So, what are the decisions based on? We have just said there are 4 factors. If you see the first one, role and processes, the location, it has to be low, the cost has to be low, the location should have flexibility in terms of availability of different benefits, it should be cost effective, the capacity allocation should be appropriate, and the facility, market and supply allocation, that means that facility should be close to the supplier and the market that it is connected to. So, capacity market. So, what are the factors? There are primarily 14 factors that influence the network design decisions. Why should I select? Why should I opt for a particular location against the other will depend upon broadly 14 factors. Let us go to the presentation and see what these factors are. The strategy of the company. The first and the most important factor is what is the kind of strategy a company has. And when you say strategy, what do you mean by strategy? Is it an offshore facility, so that I need not have high cost on exports? Source facility, low cost facility for global production involve manufacture through overseas. Server facility, contributor facility, regional market support, regional with development skill, outpost and lead facility. So, basically the first and foremost and the most important factor that influences where a company would set up its facility or its network of facilities, and that is what the reason this chapter is called network design, designing my network, because in a particular company, mind you, each and every facility are connected to each other in the supply chain. So, that is the reason we are calling it a network of, we call it a network of facility. Okay. So, offshore source facility. So, basically what are the other factors? How well technology is available, at what cost, the computer chips, etc. Macroeconomic factors. So, first is technology, then macroeconomics in terms of tariffs, incentives offered by that particular government or state where I am going to set up my facility. Political factor. When a company decides to establish its facility, plant, warehouse, etc., he would prefer a location, whether it is a country or a state, where the governance is stable, because change in the political scenario also change in various factors connected to logistics, which a company would rather avoid, because changes in rules, changes in administration, changes in process invites lot of challenges for a particular company. So, it would set up its business, its facility in an area where the governance is very, very stable. Next come infrastructure. How are labor available? How are the road, how well is it connected to the ports? How developed are is the air cargo? How well the local utilities are available? How is the transportation channels within? Power, water, availability of power, water, etc. They all fall under the category of infrastructure. And a company ideally who intends to set up a facility would do that at a place where infrastructure are developed. That is the reason you find today all developing countries, not developed countries, developing countries are more focused. If you see that in India itself, we are ensuring a very, very fast growth in our infrastructure development. our roads, our ports, our airways, our power supply, our waterways, because without that we won't be able to invite company to set up their facilities in our country. Even our own companies would rather move away from our country and set up their facility in overseas location where infrastructure is very strong. Competitiveness, positive externalities. Now, I will give you an example. Suppose there is an automobile company. What do you mean by positive externalities? Just for this sake, we have come back. A company who wants to set up an automobile center in an area, he would do it at a place where there is an automobile plant already established. Though that invites competition for him, but still he would do that for one reason, because the other automobile unit would have already developed a very strong supplier base. Now, when you establish your plant at a particular region, you need to have a very strong supplier base. Suppliers who are going to supply your raw material, your components, etc., etc., etc. And it takes a lot of time to create that supplier base. So, I would rather set up my facility, I would rather set up my plant where I already have a very strong network of supplier base. So, that is called the positive externalities between the companies, that the companies would use a common base of supplier or common resources for mutual benefits. We will go back again. So, customer response time and local presence. So, basically this is the competitive next factor that influences the network design is extremely important, logistics and facility costs. Logistics and facility cost, they form a very, very significant part of the total cost for a company. So, what are the logistics and facility costs? It has inventory cost, it is transportation cost, and it is facility setup and operating that facility. So, if you see, I would never, a company would rather not set up its facility at a place where such logistics and facility costs are very high, where the cost of managing the inventory is high, where the cost of transportation is high, where to set up the facility, the land cost, the labor cost, and once you have set up, the day-to-day operating cost is very high. So, this is a very, very important factor that influence the network designing decisions. We will go to the other factors now. The socio-economic factors, extremely important. What are the social beliefs, what are the practices in a particular region or a country? Whether that particular product is acceptable by the society. How would the customer respond? If I have to set up my plant, that means I have to sell the product. How would the customer in that particular area respond? How fluctuating is the exchange rate in that company? Is there a demand risk? Is the demand very volatile in that area? So, company would rather not set up its facility or plant in a place where the demand is very, very fluctuating. Rather, they would rather like to have a uniform and a stable demand. When you say exchange rate, when you are operating at a particular price, when you are setting up your facility in a different country and the exchange rate fluctuates quite frequently, your balance sheet is disturbed big time. So, if you have started with a favorable exchange rate and suddenly within no time the exchange rate shoots up, your operating cost is going to go very high. Next was the demand risk we have just mentioned. If the demand is not stable, then there is a danger of that facility going idle. Tariffs and tax incentives. We have seen many developing countries inviting countries having huge resources in terms of labor, in terms of land, in terms of power, in terms of water. In order to develop that country industrially, they invite companies from other countries to come and set up their business in that particular country. We have seen that even the different states within the country, we have seen in India as well. States which are developing, they are inviting. When Hyderabad set up, for instance, we decided to invite a lot of IT companies and we offered them very favorable tariffs in terms of taxes, in terms of other benefits, in terms of import duties, in terms of land, and that is the reason they decided to come and set up their business in a particular state or a city in India. And that is not only restricted to Hyderabad. If you see, if you go around, there are many states, for instance, Bhubaneswar, Andhra Pradesh, they are offering very, very favorable incentives and other facilities in order to invite investment from other companies into that particular state. In the process, develop the state and create a lot of employment. When companies from other countries or other regions, they come and set up their office, they need manpower to run the show, and eventually by doing so they create a lot of employability. In our country, employability is a big concern, big challenge. So, these are the benefits which are offered by different state government, by the different national governments as well, central government as well. Freight and fuel cost. Let us go back to the slide. The next one is freight and fuel cost. Here you are. And positive external between firms we have already mentioned. By freight and fuel costs, countries where, because when you are talking of logistics cost, logistics has no meaning without movement or transportation of goods, right? And what freight cost depends upon? Upon fuel cost primarily. Countries having very high fuel costs, they charge very high price for movement of shipment from one place to the other, and vice versa. So, companies will always be attracted to set up business at locations where the freight cost is pretty low. So, their logistics cost, overall logistics cost comes down. So, this is another factor, very important factor that influence a company when they decide, when they take decisions on network designing. Let us go back. This is extremely important, this chart. This chart tells you, or this diagram tells you, that network decision, when a company sets up or they do their network designing, they go through a four phases of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 and phase 4. Let us see the slide once again. So, and they all happen in sequence. So, certain decisions are taken at the strategic level, and what are these decisions? Competitive strategy, global competition, capital, availability of capital, growth, existing network. In later slides, we are going to see different other factors for the different phases. In the second phase, the company considers the production technologies, the cost, scale, scope, impact, support. Basically, they select a particular region to set up their facility. In phase 3, within that region, they decide certain, they shortlist certain desirable sites, and in doing so, what are the factors they consider in phase 3? Production methods, skills, response time, availability of infrastructure. We just go back for a while in phase 2, and phase 2 they consider the tariffs, the incentives, the size, growth of local specifications, political exchange rate, demand risk, and at the end they decide on the specific site where they are going to build the facility, and at that time what are the factors they consider? Labor, material, sites, transportation, inventory, coordination, etc. So, this is a very, very important diagram, and this diagram in a nutshell specifies a company's decision making process in terms of network designing. These are the informations required. We have seen facility labor, sales price, taxes, desired response time. Okay. So, phase 1. This is phase 1. So, what are the factors that a company discuss? What are the factors the company considers at this stage? Only after phase 4 is the actual site for establishing the facility is decided. This is the very first and the preliminary stage. So, a company has decided, Amazon has decided to build its distribution center to cater to the Indian market, for instance. So, what are the areas that they would discuss or they would consider when they are doing a strategic decision at a very, very senior level? Let us go to the slide and see these factors. The broad supply chain decisions. What would be the stages of the supply chain, where it would start with? What are the different facilities? How the facilities will be linked with each other? How we design the supply chain? What are the activities that we are going to do that the company would ask within the company, within our own resources, and what all activities we are going to outsource? What would be our competitive strategy? This is very important. To combat the competition, what are the strategies we need to adopt in order to eliminate competition or go ahead, stay ahead of them? What are the customer needs? How do I fulfill the customer needs in that particular region? What are the capabilities I have? It is not a question of whether I can, if only if I have capabilities that I will be able to satisfy the customer needs. What are the global evolutions? What are the changes happening, and how is it going to affect my decision on network at a particular location? Where am I going to get the capital from? Very important. What are my financial resources? Where do I get the capital from? Where do I get the capital for the initial investment? Where do I get the capital for the operating expenditure? Am I going to build a facility myself? Am I going to make the facility my own property, or am I going to take it on a lease for a particular period? So, these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 decision making areas at the strategic level in phase 1, right. Let us go back to the slide and see what happens in stage 2. It is almost like, not exactly similar. If we just think of when we decide to build a house, we first decide, we do not even start thinking of the location to start with. My purpose, my budget. So, what all areas, suppose I have an option of building a house anywhere in India, I will decide which state I am going to build. Is it my hometown? Is it going to be away where I am going to, what would be my budget? Is it going to serve my purpose? Am I going to be close to my workplace or within a city? And then I decide, I select certain regions. Suppose if I am staying in Hyderabad, I am going to decide, am I going to buy a house in Secunderabad? Am I going to buy a house at Gachibowli? So, if I consider Gachibowli as a region or Secunderabad as a region, or am I going to buy it in Begumpet region? So, similarly, so these are the regions, and when I have selected a particular region that okay, I am going to build my facility or house in Gachibowli, then I am going to decide, select a very specific location in Gachibowli or in that part of the city. What would be that specific? So, the same thing, almost same thing happens when a company, when a business house decides to build their facility. In phase 2, it is all about the regional selection. Let us see what happens in phase 2. Decide the regions where facility is to be located by considering regional demand, tariffs, economies of scale, aggregating factors. Either they would set up facility in region or consolidate plants in few regions. So, either he would say that okay, I will have regional centers, I would have a distribution center in each of the regions, or I am going to have one centralized location which would cater to all the regions. Now, we will come to a little difficult part, we will have a mathematical derivation. Now, there are certain models. To make it easier, now a company takes a decision based on certain mathematical calculation. Okay. For instance, let I denote the plant of a company where he is producing his products. Let J be the market. So, he is producing in I and he is sending for consumption in J. Let N be the total number of plants that the customer has built or facility, plants or facility, right. Let M be the total number of markets. Let Xij be the quantity that moves from plant I to J. let Dj be the total demand of all the J markets. J can be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, anything. I can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, anything, right? And let Fi be the fixed cost of plant I. So, what is my total cost? So, total cost is fixed cost plus variable cost. So, what is fixed cost? Fi is my fixed cost. So, Fi I is equal to 1 to n. As I said, n can be 1, 2, 3, 4, anything. So, if there are 2 plants, my fixed cost would be F1 plus F2. If it is 3, F1 plus F2 plus F3. So, since there are 9 plants, my cost is F1 plus F2 plus F3 plus F4 etc. to Fn. Let C be the cost of sending 1 unit of good from plant I to market J. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right. So, I have 8 variables. So, my fixed cost is summation 1 to n Fi, and what is my variable cost? Summation I is equal to 1 to n and j is equal to 1 to m xij into Cij. This is very simple, nothing to get complicated about. Fi is the fixed cost of the customer, a fixed cost of running I plants, Xij is the quantity moved from plant I to plant j, and Cij is the cost of moving this. So, the total cost, suppose if moving 2 tons of material, suppose my cost is rupees, hypothetically, just to explain this, moving 1 unit is rupees 100, suppose. Now, to move 50 units, rupees 50 into rupees 100, that is exactly what I have written over here. This unit moving from market I, plant I to market j, and the cost for doing that is Cij. So, that is the reason we have double summation I 1 to n and j 1 to m. And what our objective is to minimize this cost. This is one model. So, a company's objective is to find out what is his fixed cost based on the facility and what is his variable cost. Variable cost includes the transportation cost. The transportation cost of moving X amount of product at the rate of rupees C. So, moving 1 unit is rupees 100 and I am moving 50 units. So, my cost is 55,000 rupees. Here we are saying the same thing. So, and the objective is to minimize this total cost. That is my objective. In the next session, we are going to end this session over here. We are going to discuss all the other models. We are going to discuss this particular derivation once again for your benefit, and there are certain assumptions that we have to make over here, that also we will discuss. Because if you have this concept clear, then you will know exactly what are the models that a company practices to decide the kind of what is the network they should be having, where they should be having the facility. Basically, they will select the place where this total cost is minimum. Thank you for this session, this couple of sessions. I think you enjoyed. You will very soon know our schedule for the next week. Till that time, have a good time, have a good weekend. I'll see you next week. Thank you very much.